we head over to the church corner. So a bishop of Sri Lanka. We have, Dear Reverend Fathers, it has been brought to my knowledge that several parishes in the Archdiocese of Colombo have appointed girls as altar servers. In this context, I wish to reiterate, and I stated at the Presbyterial meeting held on 21st October 2024, that no girls should be invited to serve at the altar as altar servers in the Archdiocese. It should always be young boys because this is one of the main sources of vocations to the priesthood in Sri Lanka, and it will affect the number of candidates entering the seminaries, which risk we cannot take. Since females are not allowed to be ordained priests, we have to make that decision. This cannot be changed at your discretion. Please carry this out as faithfully as possible and do not think that it is your faculty to grant that. I thank you in anticipation for your usual cooperation and wish you God's blessings. This came from Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit. Sorry, the stamp is cutting it off.
Hey,
the Archbishop
for
of Colombo.
Pope? Can we get him on the papabile list there?
So this generated some controversy, and to me, it does seem a little bit like synodality, synoodling in action, but some didn't view it that way. What do we think on this one, guys?
Hey, I'm a fan of having male spaces. I think it's great. I mean, here in the United States, we look at our vocations crisis, but if you drill down and you talk to young vocations, 72% of priests point to altar serving as one of the first times they thought about. 72%. That's an enormous gimme here, guys. And I know there's the whole argument about, well, altar serving isn't the same as being a priest. It's not,
it's a dumb
community.
Argument.
Yeah, but to me, there's so few spaces in our culture for young men alone to be men, to be with other men. It does not make sense to me why we need to blow all those up as a church when our culture has blown them all up to great detriment to young men. It's like we don't have to guess about what happens when you blow up boys' spaces. We can look at what's happened the last 40 years since we got rid of XYZ. I won't go into Boy Scouts. That set off a firebomb last time.
I think that's a completely appropriate comparison.
I mean, that was all these liberal bishops in the United States kept pushing Pope John Paul II to allow for pigtails on the altar, and he finally buckled. In Minneapolis, where I grew up, we had it before it was even officially allowed. And I remember growing up in the 80s and thinking oh well, if it's nothing different, then forget it. So I never was an altar server because they allowed girls to do
it. I happen to be a beneficiary. Exactly. I happen to be a beneficiary of this approach, which. Having experienced it myself, thinking about it logically, it's just such an obvious. What he said, the fact that that's even remotely controversial is hilarious because it's a very obvious observation. Clearly, only men can become priests. Serving on the altar is preparation for that path. At least an opportunity to discern that. And so I was in one of those rare parishes where it was male only at the discretion of our priest. And to your point of there being a lack of male spaces, 100%. But I'm just trying to think about all the masculine formation that I received we would have 40 altar servers a mass. And so we had the altar server room where we kept all of our vestments. We got to hang out before mass. It was pretty awesome. We interacted in the mass in a completely different way than if we were in the pews. And a lot of us actually took great pride of the jobs that we got to partake in, some of them being more challenging that were given to the older ones, the more senior ones, but even something as low as carrying a candle through the altar and mass was really awesome. And I think a point of pride for a lot of young men. And then we were obviously able to mentor a lot of the younger ones. I think at our church, our rule was as long as you're out of diapers, you can be an altar server. And then it went up to about, I think there was some in college, but most of the time, senior in high school, you kind of pass the torch. But I think the only argument I'm really sympathetic to is, okay, we have this great opportunity for young men to grow in masculine virtue, to potentially discern the priesthood and to be amongst other boys growing to become men, which I think is great. But then that it feels like there might be a lack of that space for women, for females, and for young women. And so I'm sympathetic to potentially creating something that would actually help women to grow in feminine virtue in the church. I don't know exactly what that is. I've heard suggestions for to become sacristans. Yeah. I think I was talking specifically with our producer on this, which I think is a great idea to help beautify the church. In that way. But this is just a no-brainer. I cannot believe anyone would even be against this. And I think we need to see more of this, frankly, I think the things that have been attacked recently, men being altar servers, receiving on the tongue, kneeling, and like altar rails, I think was another one that was attacked. Like all 4 of those, I cannot overstate how actually important all 4 of those pillars being a part of my young Catholic formation, and the fact that I still hold my faith close to my heart today. It is actually a direct result of those 4 things. And so again, if we really have a synodal church and you really wanted to hear from people about what was going on, I would bring up all 4 of those things as we need to institute this in every church everywhere. That was what I would want. If you want to hear about my experience, my lived experience, doesn't seem to be received very well, but that'd be what I say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that parishes that are healthy and thriving do create spaces for girls and young women to be contributing to parish life. And that's really, so our parish, for example, our music director has an all-girls choir, and the voices are beautiful. You feel like you're at mass at like some monastery in the Middle Ages. And so the girls really do own that. And it's a girls choir. So that's one way. I think the sacristan idea is amazing and phenomenal. And then also just the moms group that we have at our parish, the young girls sort of shadow the moms, and they can help out there and run some of the charitable efforts that they do and get some leadership training there as well. So I think when we accept that, look, there are differences between the male and the female vocation in the church, and there are different roles for men and women in the church. And as parents and lay people in the church, it's our job to support the priests in raising up children who can hear their call from God based on their sex that he gave them, right? That God created them to have. And so the whole complaint that, well, if girls can't be altar servers, what is there? It just smacks of clericalism to me, and a lack of moral imagination that, wow, there actually are things women do that men can't do, right?
Well, and that's what actually our parish here in Harbor Springs, Michigan, have started to do. We have an outreach both to the young girls and the young boys at our parish. We have the Knights of the Altar, and that's where we try to get them interested in becoming servers. And then we have the Handmaids of the Altar, and they work on that exact same thing. We're like, okay, here are the different instruments. And so there's a place for both the boys and the girls to feel like they're offering, their gifts to the mass. And
did you get any pushback on the name Handmaids of the Altar yet?
No, we're pretty solid parish. We're pretty solid parish.
Nobody reads Margaret Atwood up there. Sounds good.
There's no Florence Pugh fans. I think so much of this just stems out of a misunderstanding of why people do what they do. Is like, because we want to create a space to cultivate masculine virtue that hopefully one day could culminate in becoming a priest and serving your community as a father. It does not mean that we somehow hate or think less of women. It just means we're trying to accomplish this goal with this program. And altar servers traditionally, I think it makes a lot of sense why, is to do that. That does not mean we think any less of